West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
As it has been established multiple times, there was no definitive first-hand evidence presented at the impeachment hearing. No new facts were introduced that weren't already entered into the record. That did not stop the theatrics of the Republicans, and it did not stop members of the committee from pretending they had evidence like that. Most notably, Florida Congressman Byron Donalds.
Next slide, please. For my colleagues on the other side, we're going to start talking evidence now. Oh, this is a fun one. Ladies and gentlemen, this one is from 2018. This is about 4 months before Joe Biden launched his campaign for president of the United States, December 2018. The highlight is, this is a text message between Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden was in a bad way, by the way. He was really strung out. He lost a bunch of money. He needed help. Jim Biden says, "This can work. You need a safe harbor. I can work with your father alone. It'll probably take several months and everybody can read the text."
Now, again, none of that's actual evidence of an impeachable offense by President Joe Biden. But the real issue with that presentation is that the congressman from Florida apparently brought in fabricated Photoshop slides of text messages as his supposed evidence, which eliminated the actual context and was incredibly deceptive. And he was subsequently called out on it in the hearing by his colleague, New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Earlier today, one of our colleagues, a gentleman from Florida, presented up on this screen something that appeared to be a screenshot of a text message containing or insinuating an explosive allegation. That screenshot of what appeared to be a text message was a fabricated image. It was a fabricated image. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was the staff of the committee, but it was not the actual direct screenshot from that phone. And in fact, I would like to submit to the committee the actual full context from the Ziegler affidavit number 1, exhibit 402, of the full text of that exchange. Do I have permission from the chair? Importantly, what was brought out from that fabricated image excluded critical context that changed the underlying meaning and allegation that was presented up on that screen by this committee and by members of this committee.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the number 2 Democrat on the Oversight Committee, and she joins me now. It's good to have you there, Congresswoman. This was a really striking moment. There was a much larger part of the text that sort of altered what that conversation about getting a job was really about. How did you catch that, and what does it say that that's the evidence they're using in their first impeachment inquiry?
Well, I think this just speaks to the tremendous amount of teamwork that we've been able to accomplish on the House Oversight Committee. Of course, it's an honor to be the vice-ranking member under Congressman Jamie Raskin, who we just heard from. And I think the leadership and the collaboration in that committee, and also the depth and dedication of work, people have been poring over these documents, at least those documents that House Republicans are even divulging before and sharing with the public before the hearing. But I think immediately when this screenshot was raised, first, this was not something that had been seen before, but vaguely had seemed familiar. I think we had our committee staff really tearing through every possible document to try to piece together how this possibly even came to be. And I think we were finally able to match up in real time what the actual context was, as opposed to what Congressman Byron Donalds chose to put on that screen. And it really cannot be understated how deceptive that was to take critical messages out of context, to tear apart the context that they're in, and then to Photoshop a text message bubble to make it look like it's reconstructed back on a phone. And this is supposed to be the Republican case for impeachment? I mean, at this point, we should be investigating the investigation for the ethical conduct that is happening on the Republican side of the aisle. And I think, frankly, the Republican Party knew that this was cooked and done from the beginning. Their star witnesses that they called in today said in their opening statements that there is not evidence to support articles of impeachment against the President of the United States. And so this was done from the start. I am quite not really sure why they decided to embarrass themselves in this manner today. But it was evident. You could feel it. It was palpable in the hearing room. You saw Byron Donalds there in that split screen. He himself was embarrassed, slouching in his chair. I don't know what was quite going through their minds.
Yeah, the ranking member Jamie Raskin just said that they were leaving the committee room. I mean, this was their big show, right? This was the big set piece. This was the unveiling of the thing that they have building up to since they took the House, honestly. And it seemed like they didn't even really have the heart to see it through during the actual hearing today.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's important to also underscore the significance of leaving the hearing room in such a consequential hearing. For example, when we had our questioning of Michael Cohen or other very high-profile witnesses, it is very well understood that in such a consequential hearing, your opposition is going to use every point of leverage possible. And you have to stay in those seats because in procedural votes, for example, we tried to vote on issuing subpoenas to actual firsthand witnesses like Lev Parnas and Rudy Giuliani into the kind of odd progeny of where this story even began in the first place. And we were winning those votes. They had to scramble and call back members and delay. And so you really, in consequential hearings, it is hearing 101 that all members need to be in their seats to prepare for any affront from the opposition.
That's a really interesting point, and they couldn't, I mean, which sort of segues to the larger breakdown of discipline here that's happening in the entire House. We're here 2 days away from a shutdown. I mean, I think, again, it's unclear what they really want, but, they're floating these insane cuts to Title I, which is the huge federal education program for low-income districts, cuts to WIC, which is for women with infant children. There's a bunch of people who aren't going to get paid. I don't really know if they know what their demands are. It's these big spending cuts, but even those they can't quite stomach. Do you have an understanding of what the ask here is, I guess?
I think there's an enormous amount of speculation as to the motives of this Republican infighting. And as you said, the stakes are very, very high. And for some folks that might say, oh, these federal employees may be getting back pay. Many will, but there are many people who are working who will not get back pay, including employees of federal contractors. Even in the House Capitol itself, the cafeteria workers are contract workers. And these workers are terrified because they may not get back pay. And these are some of the most vulnerable workers that we see. You're making just a couple bucks an hour. You cannot afford to miss a paycheck, let alone get one late, let alone not have it repaid. And so they are literally, the Republican Party is literally biting the hands that feed them here in the United States Capitol by playing games with a looming government shutdown. And ironically, many of the members that were wasting time in that impeachment hearing today are the same members that are holding up the votes necessary for us to pass a clean resolution to fund the government while folks settle out their differences. So as to their end game, I think, frankly, some of them just want to file a motion to vacate against Speaker McCarthy, and they think that if you shut down a government, create a crisis, then you can try to file a motion to vacate their own Speaker of the House,
yes,
Republican
yes.
Speaker of the House. But beyond that, it's very difficult to try to understand what the end game here is.
It is Friday, the 29th of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl. And she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. Oh, indeed. Just to assure folks out there, this is not a completely liquid diet in the virtual realm, of course. We do have some sustenance to balance out the, well, shall we say, the spirited liquid that we love here. And that is the French 77. That is the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails. Not an opinion, it is a fact. Oh, yeah. So some people might think it's an opinion, but no, it's a fact. So, okay, how are you? Sad news, Dianne Feinstein, as you know, has passed away at age 90. We can all have some ambivalence about many of Diane's, shall we say, imbroglios over the years. But I think that her accomplishments as a trailblazer greatly outweigh, well, what her husband might have done. Now, I don't know. I'm not so sure about the stock trades that he is reported to have endeavored upon. We know. I mean, there's a couple. You kind of, you get to live in the mansion too. But I just remember the day that she was sworn in, standing at the bottom of the steps at City Hall, as many of us were, because it's about as close. You were lucky to get that close. But many people forget that she was dear, close friends with Harvey Milk. And she's the one who found him. She's the one that tried to staunch the flow of blood, tried to give him CPR and mouth to mouth. Because that's what you did back then when you were doing CPR. And of course, Moscone was blasted away too, and that's how she became mayor. So, because of her advocacy for the gay community, especially during the Reagan years, jeez, and her leadership on that front, I think that that's admirable. I think, now, some people can argue, well, her position on the Senate Intel Committee, some of her writings prove that she was okay with, the government spying on people. Okay, well, like I said, I like to think that the more positive aspects of her legislation greatly outweigh some of the more questionable ones. The ones that kind of made us question. Even a little bit. But I have a much more mournful feeling for Dianne Feinstein than I would for, other politicos of a, shall we say, I don't know, extreme right-wing bent bordering on Nazism. I'm sorry. Because the two are not comparable. One has had a life and pretty much a legacy of helping people. And another side does not. Which reminds me, the Clinton Global Initiative is becoming a little bit more public with some of their endeavors. And, of course, anything that has to do with Bill, and especially Hillary, it has to be something evil and wrong. And this is how the brainwashing works. The Clinton Global Initiative is one of the most respected, error-free, no conspiracy, no fraud organizations in the world, rated as such over and over and over, because their task is to help people, poor people, marginalized people, women, gays. Okay? And for that, they're evil. Evil. Because the other side thinks, well, the only way I would ever do anything like that is if I can make some money off of it. So they must be making a lot of money. Because they're riding on the backs of those poor people just like we would have done. They cannot imagine that people would actually go out in the world to help people out of the goodness of their heart. Yeah, but you're paying yourself for administrative costs. Yeah, well, not at 90%. The way the Clinton Global Initiative gets rated as well as they do over these years is their administrative costs are consistently under 7%. There's an old rule back in the day. I mean, once they start going to 8%, you better start wondering what they're doing. And then so many cases, like the Trump organization, oh yeah, we're a nonprofit, 90%. Administrative costs, 10% to whatever charity they think that they're going to grift off of and get the money back. Now, just because the French 77 is the most popular cocktail here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy doesn't mean that I'm at the end of the bar ranting while I'm sipping my cocktail. Okay? I'm not. I'm sitting in the middle of the bar doing it. Okay? Don't sit at the end of the bar. I'll sit in the middle. Okay. You know, when I was in school, I was actually, when I was younger, up to high school. Actually, by the time I was a junior, I think I gave up on this practice of sitting at the back of the room because I actually thought that everybody should hear what I had to say. Yeah, I was full of myself. A lot more than now, okay? I'm just saying. I'm just, I can recognize it. You think I'm full of myself now? You should have seen me then. I've been working on it. I have. Not just paying lip service. I've been working on it. Okay. So, what do we have in store for you here on this Blue Moon Spirits Fridays as we begin this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy here in the Bistro Cafe part, because we also have the chef's table. And I know, but we serve the salads at the beginning of the meal here instead of the end, because it's actually healthier to have it at the end. But we do it at the beginning, or at least put it on the table. You choose. And usually the chef's table is at the beginning. Well, we do a little bit backwards like we do with the salads. You go back to the chef's table for a little amuse-bouche, maybe a little sweet dessert, or a sweet tart dessert, depending on the mood of the chef. Yeah, that would be me. Okay, so what do we have in store for you? This is a scary situation. A MAGA hat gunman is in custody after opening fire on dozens of protesters in New Mexico over the installation of a conquistador statue. One guy's wounded, got shot in the gut, and then wounded scores of others. Los Angeles police recovered a stolen 250-pound Japanese Buddha statue And they even have a suspect in custody, but mystery still shrouds the case. You know, it's Los Angeles. And the governor of Indiana broke ground on a $1.2 billion state prison that will replace 2 others. Oh, nice. And they think they're going to keep filling it up. They've actually created a recidivism program. Well, if you have that, why do you need a 4,900 cell prison that you expect to keep filling? That's just me. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where tens of thousands of women marched in cities across Latin America calling for abortion rights. And a Swiss Academy of Sciences panel is reporting a dramatic acceleration of glacier melt in the Alpine country, which has lost 10% of its ice volume in just 2 years. 2. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Now, of course, you know, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so, and everything else that she does here at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Kelly. If you would look across the page to the left from that chat room link, then you will notice the link to our Patreon page, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and maybe send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs that are incurred running this powerhouse of resistance. So thank you to those of you who have been doing so over these many years and allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc., do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing that and everything else that he does here at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, etc., at Justice Putnam, or simply as Justice Putnam, as, you know, it may apply. So I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. That just comes up, I put it in queue, and it just publishes. And you can find the actual articles and clips that we use here for such inspiration in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And if you follow my social media feeds, you have easy access to those show notes and links. Do it. Follow the show on Twitter. We'll get on the other platforms soon. And on Twitter, it is at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really, wherever you can find podcasts. You're just not going to find them at Stitcher anymore because of SiriusXM. I got to stop that, because maybe Sirius will let us come in as a block. Maybe. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we should just say, since SiriusXM took over Stitcher, maybe that opens doors for us at SiriusXM as requested by listeners out there in radio listening land. All right. More serious endeavor here, because A.J. McDougall from the Daily Beast brings us this first offering. A suspect is in custody after a shooting broke out at a protest in New Mexico over the installation of a statue of a conquistador, leaving at least one person in the hospital. The gunman reportedly seen earlier in the day on Thursday, sporting a red Make America Great Again hat, was collared by sheriff's deputies shortly after fleeing the scene in a white Tesla, according to the Albuquerque Journal. The newspaper reported that he identified himself to a Journal photographer on the scene as Ryan Martinez prior to the shooting, and that he shot a Native American man following a scuffle. The Rio Arriba County Sheriff's Office also identified the suspect as a Ryan Martinez, age 23. A state police spokesperson did not immediately return the Daily Beast request for comment, because when have you ever heard anybody returning requests for comment? When? The injured man, who authorities said suffered a gunshot wound to the upper torso near the chest, you mean in the gut, was taken away from the scene in an ambulance and was being treated at a local hospital. Roughly 6 people were in the area for an Española rally, according to the Journal, gathering to weigh in on a controversial statue of Conquistador Juan de Oñate, the statue of Oñate, New Mexico's first colonial governor, and the man who instigated a massacre of hundreds of Native Americans in 1599 was removed and placed in storage in 2020. It was meant to be reinstalled this week until a successful push by activists convinced local officials to delay the move. Jeremy Childs of the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Los Angeles police recovered a stolen 250-pound Japanese Buddha statue valued at $1.5 million over the weekend and arrested a suspect in the case, authorities said on Wednesday. But the suspect is not believed to be the original thief, and mystery still shrouds the heist of the centuries-old artifact. Paul Henderson, director of the Barakat Gallery in Beverly Hills, where the statue was housed, said the bronze statue was found Saturday night, stowed in the bed of a truck with no license plate. We're ecstatic, we're shocked, Henderson told the Times, adding that they were anticipating a much longer period to find the statue. He said an anonymous tip was what clued investigators into its location. The registered owner of the vehicle, identified as Justin Livick, age 44, was arrested on suspicion of receiving stolen property. He was cited and released on Sunday, according to online jail records. An LA Police Department spokesperson said Livick was arrested in connection with the discovery of the statue, but he is not believed to be the original thief. No additional arrests have been made as of Wednesday, and the investigation remains ongoing. The theft was reported on the night of September 18th at the gallery at 941 North La Cienega Boulevard. Surveillance footage of the incident show a suspect pulling up to the rear gate of the gallery in a rental van. The individual, who remains unidentified, used a dolly and ropes to remove the statue from among hundreds of other ancient art pieces housed at the gallery and into the van before driving away. I prized it so much, gallery owner Fayez Barakat said. I had it in the backyard of my home, and when I moved into this gallery, I put it in the backyard of the gallery for everybody to admire and enjoy. Henderson said the statue dates from the 17th century. A inscription on the statue attributes the piece to the artist Tadazao Inume from a commission by Ryozan, a religious official. The piece, probably the centerpiece of a Buddhist temple, shows the Buddha as a young man with an athletic build, seated with his legs crossed, and a crown and halo atop his head. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb broke ground yesterday, Thursday, on a $1.2 billion prison in northern Indiana that will replace two others in the state's costliest building project ever. The new Westville Correctional Facility in LaPorte County, when finished, will replace the existing facility with that name and the nearby Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. The current Westville Prison was converted more than 40 years ago from a state mental health center built in 1951, while the first bricks of the state prison were laid before the Civil War. The 1.4 million square foot new prison is expected to house up to 4,200 male inmates and will provide a modern and efficient space for both inmates and more than 900 Department of Corrections staff working there. Holcomb, a Republican, said in a news release, "We are consolidating and building the largest correctional facility in the state, with much-needed security upgrades, expanded health care and education services, and an enhanced recidivism program for incarcerated individuals." Well, wait a second. Shouldn't it be anti-recidivism? I don't know. The new prison, due to be completed in early 2027, will include a 240-bed mental health unit, he said. The Republican-controlled General Assembly funded the new prison in the 2021-22 and the 2023-24 state budgets. Well, that's okay. They just took the money away from starving kids. All right. And that's how you keep filling up your prisons. Starve the kids. When they go to steal a loaf of bread, well, you know, it's miserable. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Murder in the Third Degree. If Kenneth Branagh's and Michael Green's Murder on the Orient Express was about grief, and their Death on the Nile was about love, then A Haunting in Venice is about being haunted by the horrors you have seen, with worry for your loved ones who suffer, by regret for the love you never got, but most of all, haunted by death, by the people you've lost. Based on Agatha Christie's A Halloween Party, A Haunting in Venice takes place in 1947, a scant couple of years after the war, and it continues our arc with the weary Hercule Poirot, who has now sequestered himself in Venice, only to have his isolation breached by a writer acquaintance, played by Tina Fey, who begs Poirot to help her debunk a medium, Michelle Yeoh, what more do you want, at her seance in an infamously haunted villa. And on Poirot number 3, it feels like director Branagh, writer Green, cinematographer Haris Zambaloukas, and casting director Lucy Bevan have really hit their stride. This movie is so tight, starting with the opening frames introducing us to important visual and narrative motifs: birds, clocks, statues, eerie lifeless watchers from the past, and water. Yes, the cast is a collection of stars, but they feel more chosen for what they can do with the roles than for their bankability, giving Branagh's crew their strongest ensemble yet. Lucy Donaldson's editing is often abrupt, like jump scares, and Branagh and Zambaloukas are all over the place with their camera, spinning and panning and dollying, or surprisingly close at unsettling angles. Some compositions are set, some evolve, and some of the most beautiful shots of all the Branagh Poirot films so far. A Haunting in Venice is not horror, it's still a mystery, but it feels like these people joyously embraced being dark, creepy, and ghosty. You know, it took so long to get Branagh Poirot number 2 after number 1, number 3, only a year later, feels like a surprise early Halloween gift. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, this is Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
We bring you the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind.
And we break down the medical research to help you stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're talking about a bunch of new blood tests for Alzheimer's disease. They're a lot easier than existing diagnostics, but they may not always indicate disease. And some doctors warn that there are still a lot of questions about treatment.
So, Alzheimer's. About 6 million people in the U.S. are afflicted by this type of dementia. It is a thief of minds, a destroyer of memories, and it's a killer with no cure. I've known people who've had it, and it's scary to see what it does. How about you?
I've also known someone close to me who has Alzheimer's, and it is a really devastating disease. I mean, it really takes away a sense of your identity and self, and really a part of your personality to have this disease. So it's hard to watch somebody go through that.
Yeah, that thing that you said about like losing your identity, losing your memories of yourself and of the people around you is just a devastating thing. And you also lose the ability to take care of yourself, to wash yourself, to cook, to bathe, to do all of these things that you've done for your entire life. They've suddenly become this thing like a puzzle you can't solve.
But there are finally some new treatments. One of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's, physically, is a buildup of this warped protein, amyloid beta, in the brain. And there are 2 drugs, Aduhelm and Leqembi, that are designed to clear out these amyloid clumps.
Saying amyloid is a hallmark, though, is different than saying it's a cause. There's been a really long debate over causes, and it's not over. There could be other toxic proteins or lost connections among brain cells that actually cause the disease.
Right. It could even be a combination of all those things. But recently, tests with Leqembi suggested that the amyloid-clearing drug slowed down mental decline for several months. So the drug both cleans up amyloid and may help with cognitive problems, at least for a little while.
Right. Now, because there are amyloid-focused treatments, even if they're not super effective, companies are rushing to bring out diagnostic tests to tell you if you have abnormal amyloid in your brain. 2 of these newest tests look for fragments of the amyloid proteins in your blood.
Simple blood tests sound pretty good. So how accurate are they?
Turns out that they're good, at least at connecting what's in your blood to what's in your brain. Amyloid starts in your brain, and some of it drifts down your spine in your cerebrospinal fluid. From there, a little tiny bit leaks out into your blood. One test, called Procivity-AD, can detect the proteins with 93% accuracy, according to one study. Another test, AD-Detect, which was just launched by the big national diagnostic lab Quest, does it at close to the same rate. And that's compared to the gold standards in Alzheimer's diagnostic tests.
And those gold standard tests are a lot more complicated to do. One is a lumbar puncture of the spine using a needle to draw out spinal fluid. The other is a brain scan called PET that uses a special dye to highlight clumps of amyloid in your brain.
And those are the two best at finding amyloid, though doctors will more often start a diagnosis by giving people sophisticated memory tests.
Obtaining a thorough medical history, performing a physical neurologic exam, getting labs, neuroimaging. Typically, that is how we had diagnosed Alzheimer's disease.
That is Alzheimer's expert Zaldi Tan.
I'm a memory disorder specialist, as well as medical director of the Yonah Goldridge Center for Alzheimer's Disease at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, California.
Did Tan mention why doctors want blood tests if they already have these lumbar punctures that work well?
As a matter of fact, he did.
First of all, patients don't like it very much when you do that. It involves a pretty long needle that you have to stick in someone's back and get a sample.
Ouch, that sounds painful.
No kidding. And as for the PET scans, there are not a lot of places around the country that do them, so there's a long wait. Plus, they're expensive and insurance may not cover them.
I can see why a blood test would be more convenient. So the idea is if tests show you have brain amyloid, you could take drugs that help, right?
Right.
I sense there's a but coming.
Yep. And here it is.
We don't routinely look for amyloid in a workup for someone with memory issue because there's a subset of individuals who will get amyloid positivity without having disease.
So what he's saying is tests for amyloid can be positive, but people can still be fine mentally?
Exactly. He went into more detail.
There is a study that's almost 10 years old now where they followed close to 3,000 individuals. And what they found was that people who are age 50, who have normal cognitive function, that is, they don't have memory issues, even in formal testing, 10% of them will be amyloid positive. And if you look at people who are 90 years old, about 50% of them will be amyloid positive. Again, these are people who do not have memory issues and therefore do not have dementia.
Wow, I'd heard that, but I didn't realize it was that widespread. So these new blood tests can detect amyloid, but they don't necessarily mean you're going to get Alzheimer's.
Right, and they're not cheap. That Quest test, which people can order for themselves, costs $400, and insurance isn't going to cover it. And here's another thing. The tests aren't FDA approved for diagnosing Alzheimer's. It's perfectly legal to put tests like these onto the market for measuring substances in the blood, but not to say that you have or don't have a particular disease.
That's an important difference. So, say a healthy person takes one of these blood tests, and it says they have high levels of amyloid. Has Tan ever had a patient like that?
Not yet, fortunately. I'm sure that time will come. And then I'll ask them whether they have symptoms, whether they have functional losses or difficulty maintaining their social function, etc. If they have none of these, I'll probably do a cognitive test. And if they pass with flying colors, I would say, let's just wait and see. Having amyloid positive does not mean that you are going to get Alzheimer's disease.
So, who should get this test? Like, if you have a family history of Alzheimer's, should you check it out?
Maybe if you have close family members who had the disease, plus a few other risk factors, like if you're starting to experience some mild cognitive impairment yourself, or you've had a concussion or some other traumatic brain injury. If you're younger than age 50, you probably shouldn't waste your time or money with the test Quest says. That is a low-risk category.
But what happens if you do get that positive result and then get a medical workup that confirms Alzheimer's? Then what can you do?
It's tough. Even the newest drugs like Leqembi may offer limited help, just slowing cognitive decline by 5 months or so.
Right. Plus, a few people in the drug trials had deadly brain bleeds. People taking blood thinning drugs may be at extra risk for those.
I know. And that's what's tricky about this whole thing. It's very personal and very difficult. Maybe 5 more months of remembering how to cook a favorite recipe is worth it. That could be really important to you. Or, since you might forget that recipe a few weeks later, you don't want to risk damaging your brain even more.
These are really tough choices. Alzheimer's is a devastating disease. But perhaps in the future, if the drugs get better, then an early warning of disease from these blood tests may make more sense. Treatment could start sooner, and it might lead to happier results.
Your Health Quickly is produced by Talika Bose, Jeff Del Vicio, Kelsa Harper, Corinne Leung, and by us. It's edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, give us a rating or review. If you have ideas for topics we should cover, send us an email at yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. That's yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes? Their age? The way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Get your banned books here. Get your banned books.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In the small western Massachusetts city of Northampton, of the 21,000 books donated to the September 2023 League of Women Voters book sale, more than 1,000 titles shared, as the local newspaper put it, quote, the distinction of at some point having been banned or challenged in libraries and school districts across America. Books like To Kill a Mockingbird, The Hunger Games, A Farewell to Arms, The Sun Also Rises, Charlotte's Web, Where's Waldo, and the Harry Potter series, which may strike you as just plain goofy. But sadly, there's nothing funny here. Censorship across this country is deadly serious. The Florida Department of Education has announced the recent removal of over 300 titles, and Texas school districts have banned more than 800 books. Books that deal with gender identity, LGBTQ themes, and race are the ones most targeted by censors. To bring its display of banned books up to date, the League of Women Voters purchased the recently targeted Maya Kababi's Genderqueer and George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue. One irony here, the book sale raises money for the League of Women Voters and its work protecting the right to vote, another fundamental right under attack in the United States right now.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. That was the day that the United States Congress officially created the United States Army. Not everyone agreed that the U.S. should have a standing army. 2 years earlier, at the meeting that drafted the U.S. Constitution, James Madison warned against a permanent federal army. He told those at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, quote, a standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty. Since Madison was a strong proponent of a centralized federal government, his caution about the Army was noteworthy. Perhaps these warnings is why it took Congress until the last day of their session to finally approve the measure. In fact, President George Washington had to write Congress not once, but twice to get them to act on the issue. Once it was approved, the first standing army had about 800 members. By comparison, in 2015, the Army had just under 500,000 active duty soldiers. To supplement the small army, Congress also made a provision for the president to call up troops from state militias. The stated purpose for such call-ups was, quote, protecting the inhabitants of the frontiers of the United States from hostile incursions of the Indians. While in federal service, the state militias were supposed to receive, quote, the same as the pay and substance as the regular army. One time, various state militias were used for the forced removal of the Cherokee people from the southeast on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. State militias were also deployed to break up labor strikes. Such is the case in the Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania in 1892. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 53 degrees Fahrenheit under cloudy conditions, expecting highs in the mid-60s, with an occasional rain shower during the day and afternoon, winds light and variable, expecting about a quarter-inch of rain, and then occasional rain tapering to a few showers late tonight with another about quarter-inch of rain, lows in the low 50s, winds light and variable, and then cloudy skies early will become partly cloudy later in the day with a slight chance of a rain shower or two, highs in the mid-60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and it looks like we will be carrying those temperatures maybe a nudge up a few degrees over the weekend, and it looks like maybe a drying out period until the next rain, and we hope it comes soon because we like rain until we need the snow for a snowpack, and we don't want rain melting the snow. No, we don't. Ragweed pollen is rated high in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is in the good range at 14 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate range at level 5. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 67 degrees and fair. Paris is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 81 and sunny. Kabul is 55 and fair. Kyiv is 71 and sunny. Hong Kong is 83 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 78 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 65 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 61 and fair. Chicago, Illinois is 68 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 60 degrees with rain and a flood watch. If you are in a basement, you're expecting 3 inches of rain in just a few hours. Find higher ground, please. And that is Weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Megan Janetsky and Deborah Ray from the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The streets of cities across Latin America were bathed in green yesterday, Thursday, as tens of thousands of women marched to commemorate International Safe Abortion Day. Latin American feminists who have spent decades fighting to roll back strict prohibitions, although there are still a few countries with a total ban like El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. In Mexico, marchers celebrated the recent decision by Mexico's Supreme Court to decriminalize abortions at the federal level. In Argentina, marchers had a more somber tone, worrying that the strength of a populist far-right presidential candidate going into elections in October could signal peril after years of work by feminists. Abortion was the heart of the protests, but crowds of women also raised alarm about the region's high rates of gender-based violence as well as abuses aimed at the LGBTQ plus communities. Green smoke floated over a roaring crowd of thousands of women in Mexico City who waved green handkerchiefs, which have become the symbol of Latin America's Green Wave abortion movement. Signs reading, "It's my decision," and "Free and safe abortions for everyone" speckled the crowd. The march came just weeks after Mexico's Supreme Court knocked down all federal criminal penalties for abortion, ruling that national laws prohibiting the procedure are unconstitutional and violate women's rights. The move will also require federal health institutions to offer abortion to anyone who requests it. While 20 Mexican states still have abortion bans on the books, the decision by the Supreme Court greatly expanded access to the procedure in a country where reproductive laws were long defined by its religious and conservative roots. Latin American feminists have spent decades fighting to roll back strict prohibitions. Mexico City was the first Mexican jurisdiction to decriminalize abortion 15 years ago. The trend picked up speed in Argentina, which in 2020 legalized the procedure. In 2022, Colombia, a highly conservative country, did the same. Brazil may be next.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jamie Keaton of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Swiss Academy of Sciences panel is reporting a dramatic acceleration of glacial melt in the Alpine country, which has lost 10% of its ice volume in just 2 years after high summer heat and low snow volumes in winter. Switzerland, home of the most glaciers of any country in Europe, has seen 4% of its total glacier volume disappear in 2023, the second biggest decline in a single year on top of a 6% drop in 2022. the biggest thaw since measurements began. The Academy's Commission on Cryosphere Observation said experts at the Glamos Glacier Monitoring Center have been on the lookout for a possible extreme melt this year, amid early warning signs about the country's estimated 1,400 glaciers, a number that is now dwindling. The acceleration is dramatic, with as much ice being lost in only 2 years as was the case between 1960 and 1990, the Academy said. The two extreme consecutive years have led to glacier tongues collapsing and the disappearance of many smaller glaciers. Matthias Huss, head of Glamos, which participated in the research, said in an interview that Switzerland has already lost up to 1,000 small glaciers and that now we are starting to lose also bigger and more important glaciers. Glaciers are the ambassadors of climate change. They make it very clear what is happening out there because they respond in a very sensitive way to warming temperatures, he said. The study underlines once again that there is big urgency to act now if you want to stabilize the climate and if you want to save at least some of the glaciers. The team said the massive ice loss stemmed from a winter with very low volumes of snow, which falls on top of glaciers and protects them from exposure to direct sunlight, and high summer temperatures. All of Switzerland, where the Alps cut a swath through most of the southern and central parts of the country, was affected, and glaciers in the southern and eastern regions melted almost as fast as in 2022's record thaw. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.